Running High is a very unusual yet unique futuristic style racer that was released for the PlayStation in Japan only in 1997. This game would be quite rare to many, as with it only being released in Japan, there's many people out there that wouldn't even know that this game even exists. And essentially what this game is, it's a high speed futuristic foot race game that instead of racing as cars or automobiles, you race using high powered mech type suits that characters wear. That helps them to increase their overall running speed. That gives them very unique abilities, and the goal is to compete in a tournament to win races. And like many other racers of the time, it does have a very similar type of arcade vibe and aesthetic to it. So you have 3 initial tracks to race on, each varying in difficulty, but then you will unlock a 4th track once you manage to win each of the other tracks. But in saying that, that's no easy feat to accomplish, because the game itself, although is approachable from a standpoint if you've put time into it, but from a beginner coming in, it will take a while to figure out what to do, as not only do you have to contend with getting used to the controls, you also have to contend with aggressive computer AI, because they will also use dirty tricks and tactics to try and knock you down and to take you out of the equation while you're racing, so that they can gain an advantage over you also. So you have to be mindful of that. So you have to pretty much time your movements and your running style in order to suit various dynamics and styles and even obstacles that you will face in the game. But in saying that, although the game does run at a decent speed, especially considering with the type of suits that you're wearing, and you have different abilities with each of the characters, they all have their own attributes that you can use to their advantage. But you find that when you're going through various elements of certain courses, especially when you get to sharper turns, yes, you can use abilities like to slide on the ground to get around corners easily, but it's all about timing your specific movements and button presses, because if you mistime a button press, you will go slamming into a wall and it will completely destroy whatever little progress you have made. But even with that, there's an aggressive catch-up dynamic in the game as well, because no sooner have you sped away from all of the rest of the players, especially when you reach first place, within seconds there's always someone trying to catch up with you no matter where you are on the track. So you're constantly fighting tooth and nail to try and keep them at bay so that you can try and cross the finish line first, which is no easy feat to do or achieve. It is a very unusual game, and there wasn't really many games like this really seen. The only other games you could really compare it to on the PlayStation and such would be Pepsi Man, which is another running type game which was also quite popular in Japan, and another game released in other regions known as Running Wild, which used similar types of ideas, but it was more cartoony in nature, and instead you raced as animals with different attributes, but it had the same type of style in terms of how it played. But these type of games would also be more comparable to the likes of Sonic R that was seen on the Sega Saturn, which was a 3D running game as well that featured Sonic, Tails and all of the characters seen throughout the Sonic universe. And for its time it was very, very different, and while it was playable and it was fun, these type of games weren't the easiest to pick up and play compared to typical racers seen on consoles at the time, as they offered up a very different dynamic in terms of their control attributes and styles. So they wouldn't have been the most responsive, they could be quite sluggish, and it always relied heavily on various timing methods and special moves in order to get around corners a lot easier, which wasn't always easy to implement, especially back then, because control systems in games, especially with those type of more experimental type games, the control systems would never have been as refined or as well fleshed out compared to your typical racing game seen on consoles. So there was always that struggle, and you had to really put time into them to figure out all of the dynamics. But from a beginner standpoint, and looking from someone who just wants to pick up and play the game casually, these type of games may not be for everybody, as they are tricky to get used to. But once you do put a bit of time into them, they are a fun game in all respects. Like even with Running High, it has some really nice visuals, especially on the level environments. It has some really good use of graphics and overall style. It has a really cool visual and futuristic vibe going on in the game, which really suits the whole aesthetic that it's going for, with great use of various lighting dynamics, especially when you're outside or running even at night, or even when you're running through tunnels, that the lighting changes depending on the environments that you're in, and that also adds to the appeal of the game. It generally is a fun game to play, but it will test you, even though you do have the ability to gain speed, and you do gain access of various speed boosts that will give you a quick burst of speed to try and catch up with your opponents, but it's still tricky to master, let's just put it that way. But it's a very fun and very quirky and yet a very different style of game that was seen on the PlayStation, that while it may not appeal to everybody, it will appeal to a certain few that's looking for something that's very, very different from your more mainstream games. And for that reason alone, if you are looking for more quirkier style of games, this one here I think is worthwhile looking into, as it is a lot of fun. Once you get used to the whole dynamic of the game and you get used to the control controls, there is a good experience to be had here. And I would love to know your thoughts on Running High for the PlayStation. If you have played this game at all, or did you even know that this game even existed? I'd love to hear whatever story you do have, so be sure to share them down in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be updated of future videos. And if you would like to see more content around other types of unique and quirky games similar to Running High, also released on the PlayStation, and you can check out the playlist here on screen to see more of those games in action and keep those gaming memories alive.
Hey, get with it! Oh, darn it, yeah!